Hi guys, it's Jeff here, the photographer's mentor. So another live, and today we've got a guest called Graham Everitt. So you might have seen Graham before. Graham did a live with me earlier in the year and talked about copyright contracts. So Graham is an expert in creating contracts for photographers to protect their copyright, to protect their images, to make sure your images aren't getting used without permission or without consent. And and works with photographers to make sure they're getting the maximum amount of money for the images that they get. They're getting the right usage. They're being used by by the people who have employed them to do the job. But another thing that Graham is a bit of an expert, or when I say a bit of an expert, he's a huge expert at, is stock libraries. So Graham has managed and co-owned stock libraries for over 20 years. So he has over 20 years experience working with some really niche photography stock libraries as well. So Graham's here to answer your questions about why you should consider using stock libraries to sell your images, what type of stock libraries, how much the stock libraries are going to pay you. So if you have any questions regarding stock libraries, do please pop them in the chat as we're going live. Give me a shout, tell me where you're from, give me a little wave, and also if you do currently sell your images to stock libraries, it would be interesting to know who you're using. So just pop that in the comments as well. So which stock libraries are you submitting your images to? So I'm going to bring over Graham in a second. Bit of news from my point as well. This week is the launch of my new book. So I've created a new book called The Ambitious Photographer's Routine Journal. So you might have seen a lot of these journals that are out there. They're like motivation journals, success journals, and it's, you've got to write all your stuff down and give yourself content plans for the week and setting your goals and things to do. So I've created one purely for photographers, and I've just launched it on Amazon this week. So I'll be posting a bit more information about that tomorrow with some images of the inside of the journal. It took me quite a bit of time to put this together, and something that I've been teaching for over 5 years now. So I think it's a perfect time to get it out there, ready for 2022. So anyway, enough about me. I'm going to bring Graham in and we can start the show rolling, talking about stock images and stock libraries. And hi, Andy Gibson, who's using, he's from West Cork in Ireland, and he's currently using Alamy for selling his stock imagery. So, hi, Graham. How are you? How's things going?
I'm all right. I'm fine. Thank you. Thanks for letting me back again after last time.
Oh, it did really well. I mean, we had some fantastic feedback from the last live that we did, didn't we? And it was very helpful, advising photographers about their contracts and image usage. But today you're going to hear to talk about stock libraries. You've had an extensive experience in, managing and co-owning stock libraries in particular niches of stock libraries. So effectively, what is a stock library or a stock agency? Is there a difference between the two, or the same thing?
No, it's a generic term. Let's be honest. It's stock library, stock agency. It's the same thing. So a stock library, they don't own the images. They license images which are provided to them by photographers. So they can have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Well, in the case of Getty or some of the larger libraries like Shutterstock, we're talking millions and millions of pictures. But on the whole, they don't own the imagery that is available for people to download and buy on their website. So what happens is a photographer or another agency. So another agency can upload images to another photo library. An example of this would be for, say there's a UK photo library and they want to expand their imagery into Japan, into Asia, or to America, or into Europe. So one photo library can upload their images to another photo library and expand their network, basically, to expand the ability to sell their images. So one agency can represent another agency, but looking at basics, what a photo library does for a photographer is a photographer can upload their images to a stock agency, a photo library. And what the photo library does is they license, let's be clear about this, they license the images on behalf of the photographer. They don't own the images. They're not their images, unless it's a photo library owned by a photographer and they're only
Yeah.
selling their images. So they license the images for a photographer. And I'm probably teaching, if the people who are listening to this, I'm telling them what they already know, probably, because they know this. But it's quite an important distinction to make, is that a photo library is different to a photographer. And the main thing is they are selling images which aren't theirs. They are licensing their images.
And obviously they have the huge reach. They have the ability to reach. These websites can host, as you say, hundreds of thousands of images. I know a few people have mentioned Alamy, Shutterstock, Big Stock, Dreamtime. Catherine's just says that the automatic captioning comes up as grim instead of grim. So I'll have to say Graham.
Yeah. Speak to my daughter and my wife. They log that. That's fine.
So from a photographer's point of view, why would I want to place images with an agency? What value can it be to me?
Well, let's be honest about it. And the modern world, it's income. There's probably two things. The main reason is extra income. If you're a photographer who is, your main living is being commissioned to take photography for a client, you may also have extra images which the client hasn't taken you up on. They don't need those images. Or you could be a photographer who shoots primarily for stock. There are a lot I think amongst the community, particularly in yours, Jeff, there are all the photographers who are within your community shoot for particular and a specific commission. There are a lot of photographers out there who shoot for stock. All they do is shoot for stock. That's their income model, basically. So there's two types of photographers. There are those who shoot particularly for a photo library, and there are those who maybe are commissioned by a client. Let's say, let's take food for an example. You're a food and drink photographer, and you're commissioned by a particular brand to shoot your photography, and you're shooting generic and specific branded images for a particular brand. You might have extra images where you've taken, say, it's a gin brand. It's a company who specializes in making particular bespoke gin. Gin's taken off, hasn't it, recently? There's more gin distilleries than anywhere else in the world, I think, in the UK. It's little bespoke just gin distilleries. But you might have extra images where you've taken pictures of cocktails, you've taken pictures of various drinks which aren't branded as such. And
so they don't have the gin bottle in the background. It's just the glass with the drink in.
Exactly, and that may not just be food. That could be a food photographer, or who's taken food for a packaging company, or a company like a big brand, Marks and Spencer's, Waitrose. You may have shot a particular brand for them, but you may have extra images, or you may shoot specifically for stock. And you've got a bank of images which you're not doing anything with. That's income for you. You could put those images in a stock agency, in a photo library, and they're not looking for branded. They're not looking for images which have a brand on, because then obviously we go back to our previous podcast. You've got images which are subject for possible copyright infringement. But if you've got generic images, and there's an income to be made for you there. And also the second part of it is exposure. If you're selling more images, if you're commissioned by someone to shoot for a particular brand or a company, and you have images left out, and you're selling more images, and your images are getting out there in magazines, newspapers, news feeds, social media, and these usually will come through a stock agency if you already supply to one. It's all extra exposure for you. Your images are out there. They're being sold, but I would say that the exposure is very much secondary to. Let's be honest about it. If you're going to put images into a stock agency, it's about income. Mm-hmm. It's extra money. It's especially for the last 2 years and COVID and the pandemic and various other things. If you've got images with a stock agency, there's an income coming for you. I work with one photographer he's a farmer. and he takes images for stock as well of all the animals that he sells and that he grazes, and he's walking around his land, and he takes images. He's an agricultural photographer, and he takes images all the time, and he's uploading them to a stock agency, and it's a consistent extra income for him, which is kept him going, Jeff, through COVID.
That's
Because
brilliant.
the
So
question,
I think obviously there's a lot of, I mean, nearly all the photographers I work with, as you know, are specialist niche photographers in obviously different genres. So that's something they could think about. Or even if you're just out walking the dog and you're taking pictures of sunsets or
yeah,
sunrises, beautiful scenery, this is
yeah,
all
yeah.
stuff that can be creating an income. So when thinking about that, what types of different stock agencies are there? Because I know that you worked and managed some really niche specialist type stocks agencies, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there are different types. I mean, I'm showing my age now. Probably with I've got a bit of grey in my beard. Let's be honest. And when I started out, it was transparencies. I mean, we used to send out transparencies. A bike would come out. I was living in London then, and a bike would come out from Canary Wharf, pick up transparencies, go back to the newspaper, to the Times, the Daily Mail, the Independent, and they would be ready for next day's issue. And overnight, and it literally overnight, it changed when the digital age came in. The digital age changed everything. We were suddenly sending images out electronically rather than transparencies. I mean, my first job in a photo library was cleaning transparencies. Can you imagine it? I was
Yeah.
in a basement in Richmond in London with some lighter fluid cleaning transparencies because they'd been out to a newspaper or a magazine or a book publisher that day, and cleaning them to get them back out for the next day. That was my first job. I needed a degree for that. I can't believe it, but apparently I did. So the world has changed, and I would say sort of 20 years ago, even 30 years ago, there were the Gettys of this world, the big libraries who sold every kind of image. It's like going to Tesco or to Aldi or to Lidl, where you can log into Getty, Shutterstock, and you can pretty much type in anything, and any image will come up. They're not specialists in any shape or form. So, and then you get your specialist libraries. So, and this is the generation I grew up in, and I'm probably a bit old-fashioned, but I still think there's a huge place for them. I really do. I've managed two specialist libraries, and the beauty of specialist libraries is that they're usually owned by photographers, Jeff. So these people who own these libraries are you. They are photographers. They're photographers. So what happens is they've been shooting all their lives in a particular genre of photography, and they think, wow, I've got a lot of imagery here. What am I going to do with it? So it could be architecture, it could be food, it could be travel, it could be social issues, it could be
Yeah.
history, it could be science. The Science Photo Library, for example, was set up by one particular photographer who shot images of very particular scientific photographs. And the SPL Science Photo Library is one of the biggest photo libraries in the UK now. Started from one photographer. And these guys are bespoke. And they're set up by a photographer, and they specialize in one particular type of imagery. And these guys are great. But the two different types are very different. What you're comparing Tesco with your local cheese shop on the high street. So say if you want to go into Tesco and buy some cheese, and you said to the guy behind the counter, this is a really nice Wensleydale. Where does it come from? Who produced it? And the guy, let's be honest, he would look at you like you were mental. You would
Yeah.
say, well, I've got no idea. I don't know where it came from. I don't know who made this cheese. Whereas if you go to a specialist cheesemaker, they can say, well, yeah, we put passion into this. We know where
Yeah.
it came from. We made it. And it's the same for photo libraries, is that, they know where their images come from. Either be the owner of the photographer, of the photo library who took them, or it would be other photographers who they've taken on board, and they sell images on their behalf, and they would know where it came from, who took it, where the image was from. They would know everything about it. And that's the biggest differences. You get the big aggregate type of libraries. Let's compare ASDA with a local food shop on the high street.
Right.
That's the two
And,
differences.
and I think now, people want, obviously now in all forms of business, people want choice. They don't want generic, and generic looks very false as well. You see a lot of you'll type in like a photographer at work or something into Google, and you'll get loads of very, very generic posed, beautiful models with cameras and stuff. You know that that's false.
Yeah.
But I mean, Andy Gibson has just said something effectively. If you put into a stock library, you could be in some ways competing against yourself, because would your clients be looking at a niche stock library, or would they be getting you to actually go and commandeer the shots? And I think the difference is obviously with your clients. If you're a branding photographer, you're all about getting their brand in there and making that brand association and a brand awareness. So you're getting logos in, you're getting bottles in. If it's like food photography, it's all about creating that brand awareness. But then there will be people who just want generic images of a pizza or generic images, but that look less stockified, I suppose, and more homemade or artisan bespoke, like your little cheese shop. So you've got these different stock agencies. So you've got the big mass-produced ones, which are your Tesco's and your, like your Shutterstocks and your Alamy and stuff like that. And then you've got the more generic ones, which is the more sort of like bespoke ones, which is like what you've managed and co-owned and stuff. So what's the difference between those on the licensing and more importantly the commissions to the photographers?
The larger photo libraries have a mix of licenses. Going back to the previous question, just very quickly, is quite interesting. I've noticed on LinkedIn recently. Sorry, Joe. I think we need to address this because it's quite important for photographers. Is that I've seen on LinkedIn recently, some photographers say, and I am a champion of photographers. I'm a champion of commission images.
Yeah, you are.
I'm a champion of protecting photographer rights and everything else. But some photographers say, why would you use a photo library rather than use a photographer? And I agree. Why would you? But not every business, not every company is in the same position. Some businesses want generic images. If you're a travel company, for example, or and you want pictures of various destinations around the world, but you can't afford to send a photographer to the Andaman Islands or to the depths of India or to somewhere in Nicaragua in South America. You can't afford to do it. So you have a choice there. You can go to the larger generic agencies like Getty, Shutterstock, Adobe Stock, or you can go to a specialist stock library which specialize, for example, in travel. And don't forget that would have been set up by a photographer. It wouldn't have been by some business mogul looking to make money. I mean, nowadays, photo libraries, if you're going to set up a photo library, if you want to make money, don't set up a photo library. 30 years ago, yes, I mean, it's great. But these guys are your brothers, really. They have everything in common with you. So I think we should maybe distinguish it. And it's really important. There isn't a competition between photographers and photo libraries. There really isn't. If you're a client who's going to use a photo library, you're going to use a photo library because you want generic images, you want quick images, you want something that's turned around quick. If you're a client who's going to who wants a commission, who wants a photograph, who wants to use a photographer, you're going to use a photographer. The two have never, ever clashed. And I think a lot of photographers who've started up in the last 20 years think, why would you use a photo library when you can use a photographer? Well, if you're a headshot photographer, let's be honest, no one's going to be in competition with you from the photo library industry. Yeah. They're not. If you're, if a famous chef or a TV program wants to use food images, well, they're only going to want images which are specific to that chef or to that television program. So they're always going to use a photographer. They always are. But magazines, newspapers, news channels want images, and they want them quick and fast. If a Spitfire crashes tomorrow in deepest Scotland, they're not going to commission a photographer to go and shoot that image. They're going to want a historical image of a Spitfire. Well, they're not going to get it from a photographer. So what is really important is there's a place for both, and photographers should not be scared of photo libraries. They're not taking business from them. They really are not. And And I've seen a few posts on LinkedIn, and I don't normally comment on posts because I don't want to sort of get involved in political discussions or whatever. And they said, a photographer said, why use a photo library? Because of when you can use a photographer. And I think, well, actually, yeah, you would use a photo library sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not taking business away from the photographer in the slightest.
It's coming back to something that I always go on about to my clients and teach clients is the fact that you should have what I call is like a pyramid, like an ecosystem of the services you offer. So you have your baseline, then you have the next line up and next line. So each packages or variation of your services and ways you can bring in money to your business, and each supplies different revenues. So you could be a wedding photographer, you get your weddings, which are your baseline, but then you also do a bit of portraiture. Then you might do some pet photography, which isn't much, but you do a bit. But then you might sell some of your landscapes online, and then you might sell a selection of stuff through stock agencies, all bringing various streams of incomes, as opposed to having all your eggs in one basket by just doing 100 weddings a year, and then a pandemic hits and you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
At least you've got different streams of income coming in.
Yeah.
So with regards to, like, obviously the specialist, our gourmet cheese supplier, or the Tesco's, how do they work within sort of, licensing and paying photographers? Is there a big noticeable difference between?
Yes. I mean, I'm probably going to get shot down if any stock library person is watching it, but mostly with specialist libraries, they give you a 50-50 split. So every single sale, let's go back to my initial point, the library does not own the images. They are all supplied, they exist by being supplied images by photographers or other agencies. So they give a 50-50 split to the photographer. If it's another agency supply, which probably isn't relevant here, that's a whole different discussion. If you're an agency in Japan, where they supply to that one agency, so that agency supplies to another, and the split becomes like 25, 10, whatever. But if you're a photographer uploading images to a photo library, you should be getting 50-50 because they're doing the work, they're advertising, they're marketing your images, they're doing all the marketing calls to magazines, newspapers. The business doesn't come into the stock library just like that. They've got to do like photographers do. You've got to market yourself.
So it's effectively it's a partnership, isn't it? In a way, it's a collaboration. And Andy's just said Almy is now about 40% to the contributor.
Well, this is the difference. That 50-50 is not across the board. So Almy is a great photo library. I remember when I was managing Anthony Blake, which is a food and drink photo library. So James West came to see me, who was the owner of Almy. Well, actually, he's just sold out. So I know James. I've known him a long time. And his whole concept behind Almy was, let's get all these specialist stock libraries. That was the first initial thing with Almy. We're talking 20 years ago, right at ground level, before Almy had even started. He said, right, we want all these specialist stock libraries to upload images, and we are going to increase the marketing capability of these libraries by 100%. We're going to get their images out there. So they were very much for the photographer, and initially it wasn't photography, it was just for image libraries, to champion the specialist stock library. And then obviously over time they started getting photographers involved, and so Almy has loads of positives. So as a photographer, you can upload your own images. Brilliant. I mean, there's not many photo libraries, if any, actually, who let you upload your own images. If you were supplying to Getty or to a specialist stock library, or to, you would have to upload them. Someone else would check them, and there's a whole process to go through. With Almy, you're very much your own man or woman. You can upload your images, and those images are there. You can manage them. You can keyword them yourself. Although Clemency, who I know you deal with, Clemency Wright is great for that. And if you're a photographer, keywording is imperative. So Clem, is brilliant for that. So you upload your images. Almy is fantastic for that. You could have 20 images as a photographer and upload them. You're probably not going to make many sales, but it's up to you it's very much up to you when you upload them, how you keyword them, what you do with them.
Yeah.
But Anime has actually changed the way it gives commission to photographers and stock agencies. It used to be 50-50. Actually, I think it used to be 60-40, with the split going towards the photographer or the photo library. But it's changed. And
There's a few people saying, are there still places, where can you get these 50/50s? And so have you got examples of places like specialist
most,
places where they pay
most
the higher
specialists,
fees?
I think I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot now. I think most specialist libraries still give 50-50. And when I say a specialist library, we're talking smaller libraries. We're not talking Getty, Anime, Shutterstock, Adobe. We're talking AWL Photo Library, who specialize only in travel. We're talking View Pictures, who only specialize in architecture. John Walmsley, who only specialize in education photographs. They usually give you 50-50.
Right. Are these sort of contracts negotiable, or is that like a fixed one? So if you
No,
go and you sign up to this,
it's fixed. It's fixed. But there's two very, let's look at the differences. There's a specialist stock library. They're not going to have the outreach of a big Getty. It's such a, there's a whole nother podcast.
yeah,
There's such an issue here. Okay, you sign up with Getty, you sign up with Alamy, you sign up with Shutterstock. You have a huge reach, Jeff. It's a massive reach. You have a worldwide reach. You might be selling images in Japan, Canada, South America, China, Japan, but your commission is going to be lower than with the specialist stock library.
But likewise, I suppose with the specialist, the specialist is going to have a smaller reach. It's going to be specialised. It's going to pay you more commission. However, I imagine there's going to be less competition. So obviously, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? So when you go across to the big guys, it's less commission, it's bigger reach, but it's more competitive. So it's going to be harder for your images to get seen.
Yeah, and also with the bigger guys, you've got to. I think one of the questions we're going to touch on later is how many images should you put up with a photo library? I mean, if you're going to put an image with Shutterstock, I mean, you're talking. There are photographers out who put millions of images with them, and the only way you're going to make any money with Shutterstock, because they sell images, which I think we'll come on to, for a different price to which specialist stock libraries do. So there's an aggregate economy here where you're putting images with Shutterstock, Getty, and you're sending images for a certain price. Whereas with a specialist library, very important point here, they sell images for a much higher price. They're on your side. As the photographer, they're on your side. They're not going to just give away their pictures. They're not going to sell images for a £5 or £10 or 20 quid. So I work with, say, AWL Images, which is a travel photo library, and they sell travel images to holiday brochures, magazines, newspapers. Every newspaper has a travel section. They won't sell an image for much less than 50, 60 pounds for editorial use, let alone commercial use. And the reason is because they don't want to upset their photographers. They are very much champions of the photographer. You will never see them selling an image for 10 quid, because what will happen is, Jeff, is that the firm will go and say, the photographer will get their statement and they will say, I've just got my statement. Why are you selling my images for a tenner, to worldwide, all languages, promotional use in a brochure? And I've just got 10 quid for it, or even 5 quid for it. Whereas if you go with Shutterstock or Anime, you haven't got a leg to stand on, because they will sell your image. They're going to sell your image. They're not going to phone each one of their tens of thousands of photographers and say, we've just had a client contact us and they're offering £10 a picture, but we're going to sell 100. Would you be okay for that? They're not going to phone their photographers. And also the other thing with Getty is they're selling tens of thousands of images every year, so they can afford to sell their pictures for £1. Whereas a specialist stock library are not selling tens of thousands of images for a year. So they're not going to sell their images for a quid. And so you've got that it's a very difficult, and it's only an answer a photographer can answer himself, is, do you go for ASDA, where you're selling your product for you're selling a lot, maybe more, but for £1 an image or £10 an image, or do you go for a specialist stock library who cares about you, who is owned by a photographer who will be selling your images for hire, but you may not.
I suppose with with the specialist, you if it is that niche and that specialist, the guys who own this are going to start to know the photographer. They're going to see the sort of the type of
Yeah.
work that the photographer puts forward. So they're going to appreciate you more. They could even get in contact with you and say, "Oh, we've got a photographer need, a client needing stuff of this. Have you got anything in your libraries or in your archives?" So I think from a business perspective, less competition, higher. It is niche, but if you hit the right clients and you produce the right sort of income, you could be starting to create a demand through that
Yeah.
through a niche, and get known for. Yeah, he sells through this and exclusivity. Is that something that you've experienced that photographers can make a lot more money from?
Yes, because smaller stock libraries can, despite what many photographers think, offer exclusive licenses, and are not often that much more than a non-exclusive license. So, so if you were to buy an image from Getty, it's very unlikely they're going to give you an exclusive license because they're selling images here, there, and everywhere. But a smaller specialist library is going to have a control over their images. They know where they're going to go. They're going to know who's buying them because the sales for a start are smaller, but they're higher in value. But so if you were I don't know, let's say you were a travel company and you wanted an image on the front cover of your travel brochure. Do you want your competitors to be using that same image on the cover of their travel brochure? You don't. I mean, can you imagine Thomas Cook and trail finders having the same image on their brochure?
Yeah.
And small specialist libraries can offer something that photographers also can. I mean, these guys aren't working against you. They can offer exclusive licenses, and they usually do. And that's when we're going back to sometimes on LinkedIn, I've seen posts by photographers saying, I'm a whatever photographer. And that's that. Sometimes they don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to put it out there. And they say, I'm a photographer. And why would you use a photo library? And you go, and I do respond sometimes and say, I'm your champion. I'm with you as a photographer. But you are putting photography and photo libraries in a huge group. And they're not all same. They really are not. You can.
It's very similar to, I think, your comparison with like the Tesco's, and the Tesco's doesn't fight for the farmer, but you have like the specialist shops who pay higher because they go into getting organic milk, and then so the farmer will sell less, but you'll get more for his product. The Tesco's couldn't give a toss about the supply. It's the supply chain, and so they do. I suppose when you're looking at it like that, and you can put that comparison. Now, a lot of people seem to be, commenting in the comments there. They weren't aware of these specialist sites. Can you give us a few examples of different specialist sites? And is there anywhere that I would go to find out is there a directory of specialist sites?
Yes. Yeah, there is. The best place to go to is BAPLO. It's the British Association of Picture Libraries and Agencies. So BAPLA. Jeff, I'll send you a link to it. And on there, you won't find Getty on there. You won't find Shutterstock. BAPLA was set up by photographers probably about 30, 40 years ago as individual photo libraries set up by, say if you're an architectural photographer or a food photographer. So I'll give you I'll give you me as an example. So Anthony Blake Photo Library. Anthony Blake was a very, very well-known food photographer in the 1970s and 80s. He did a book which was groundbreaking called The Great Chefs of France. And he was the first photographer to photograph chefs. But not only chefs, they were working in their natural environment. So these chefs all around France. So we're talking the Roux brothers, and this is before Gordon Ramsay and all these chancers who came along. These are the guys who Escoffier and people like that, and he photographed them in their working environment in their kitchens. So Anthony Blake was a food photographer, and he set up a photo library. He thought, okay, I'm a photographer. I have amazing, groundbreaking images. And then he asked other food photographers to join him and then view pictures. Dennis Gilbert, who set up View Pictures. He passed away recently, and it's one of the saddest things ever because he was one of the most greatest architectural photographers. He was a gentleman, and he set up View Pictures to encourage he encouraged young architectural property photographers to join him at View Pictures to sell pictures to clients for a good price and where you got a good commission. You weren't Getty, you weren't Shutterstock, whatever else. So, there have all these specialist stock libraries out there. And Bapla, BAPLA, is the place to go because they don't. They used to have something called the I think it was the Bapla. We used to be called. Well, there's been Picture House recently, where you can go and only specialist stock libraries are allowed to exhibit. So you won't see Shutterstock, you won't see Getty and Adobe stock. You only see the photo libraries with a lovely photographer stood there behind the stand saying, yeah, the Science Photo Library. Have you heard of that, Jeff? Science Photo Library. They're a massive, where every picture of COVID and the virus that you've seen in the last 2 years, I can pretty much guarantee every single image on the BBC news page has come from the Science Photo Library, set up in the 60s by a photographer.
Right. There's a couple of people have asked about. Somebody says both Getty and Alamy are on Bapla, and then a couple of people have asked if there's is there an agency for music photographers?
Yes, there is. There's Bridgman. There you go. Bridgman. So what? Some of these points afterwards, and I will send you a link to Bridgman there, and also there's a couple other music photographers. And going back to your previous, yes, Bapla do have Getty on there, and they do have Shutterstock because they are open. You cannot be a monopoly, so you have to allow every single photo library to advertise. You can't say, well, we're not going to let big photo libraries advertise with us like Getty, so because you can be accused of being a monopoly. So, but Bapla were very much set up with the specialist stock library in mind. You can find Getty on there, and you will find Shutterstock, but you will also find photo libraries you have never heard of before.
So what sort of photography? Is there any particular, or is it very much like a trend thing? So obviously, lately people have been looking for. Like the medical stuff with COVID, people have been looking for a lot of lifestyle stuff with people being at home and working from home. So I suppose people are searching a lot for different trends and whatever's in the news or whatever's current or whatever's, I suppose on trend to buy or purchase or do. So I suppose it changes a lot with lifestyles. But is there any particular genres or niches of photography that work really well over others on site sales?
No, I would say they're probably genres that don't work. We look at the ones that don't work as well before the ones we look at do work as well. So I hate to say it, but headshot photography, you're not. Let's be honest, it's not going to sell as a stock image for obvious reasons because no one's going to buy it apart from the person or the company. But certain types of photography do lend themselves to stock. So food, architecture, travel, education, social issues, science, whatever else. So, but there are different types of photographers. There's some photographers who shoot particularly for stock. So there will be food photographers out there I remember at Anthony Blake, we had one photographer who just shot for stock. All he did was get a white cutout and shoot apples, bananas, pears, lasagna, chicken, everything you can think of to do with food. He shot on a white background, and he was our biggest selling photographer, Anthony Blake. So there are those photographers who shoot specifically for stock, and so they might be particularly in food or architecture or travel. There might be those photographers who shoot for, brands. They might be commissioned by a particular brand. So, for example, you are out shooting a footwear or an outdoor clothing brand. But whilst you're out on the mountains of Scotland shooting your commission for a particular brand of outdoor clothing, you're going to be shooting other stuff around you. So But the important thing is to check. Goes back to the contract, which we were talking about in a podcast many months ago. You need to check with your client first of all. So you can't just suddenly upload all the images from a particular shoot if your client has commissioned you. Even if they haven't used those images, you need to have it in your contract that you have explained that you may be uploading certain images to a photo library. I mean, if you were doing a shoot, for example, for food, and you were shooting, I remember at Anthony Blake, we had a studio there, so we used to shoot for Marks and Spencers. So we used to shoot all their packaging, all the packaging shots for, and it was great. Because we got free food. My wife thought I was an amazing cook for the first 6 months. For the first 6 months of my life, she thought, Jesus, this bloke's amazing. And she didn't realize that Gary Rhodes was doing his cookery book. And
Brilliant.
so I used to pop it in the microwave, and it had been cooked. But she would, that's the only reason I'm married, actually, because of Gary Rhodes. He's gone now. But if you're shooting for a particular client, you're going to have ingredients. You're going to have further opportunities for further images. So, it's a bit of a mindset, I think, stock photography, is that you don't just suddenly think to yourself, I'm going to start shoving all my images up onto stock, because they're not all going to sell. I think you've got to have a bit of a mindset for it. You've got to say, right, this is my commissioned work. This is what I earn my main bread and butter from. But, if I'm doing a shoot for a particular company, maybe I've got an opportunity here to say to them that, I'm going to do a few extra shoots today. There's a generic image of a lasagna here. There's a generic image of a chicken Kiev. There's a generic image of whatever. And I can upload those to a stock library. So it's a big separation. And that is why your photographers, and it's important for you as well, Jeff, is that your photographer commission work, and they're not in competition with photo libraries. They're not. They never have been.
So when you're doing this shoot, I mean, obviously it's obvious with like ingredients and pizzas and architecture and stuff like that. But for instance, I know that Jackie last week was photographing COP26. So you've got somebody like Zav or Linda, who maybe goes out and photographs the Foo Fighters or something like that. So like a music photographer with bands in and people in the crowd, or Jackie photographing protests. Where do you stand with uploading content to photo libraries with real people in?
It's difficult. That I have to say, that's difficult, and that is a grey area. And if you're that kind of photographer, unless you have particular model or property releases, if you can see a particular face or whatever else, if you can see a particular property and it's been used to commercialize your site and sell your photography, you really should have a release in place. I think it's different if you're supplying to a news channel, so you're not focusing on a particular person, you're not focusing on a particular property. If you're just, let's say there had been a demonstration at the Glasgow, the conference recently for the environmental issues. If it had been a general sort of scene of people marching to complain, to protest about a certain issue, you could upload that to, say, for example, the BBC website or to Reuters, for example, and that would be fine. So you're not emphasizing, you're not picking out a particular person, and I think that's that's fair use. That's fair use. But if you are looking at a particular person in particular, then I think you're looking at problems. But stock photo library isn't really about those sort of areas, to be honest with you, Jeff. It's more about the generic. Let's be honest. It's about the best. I know, for example, the Anthony Blake photo library, the best-selling images we had too was a roast chicken on a white plate and a glass of champagne clicking against another glass of champagne with fizzy bubbles in.
For thinking about that, I mean, because that I bet that was a massively searched image on the 31st of December. The toast for New Year. The champagne. So I suppose as a photographer, if we're doing stuff, thinking about potential neutral usage of our images, so we photograph them for a client, but then think, is there any way, can I get some shots of this egg cracking into a bowl before we. Before we focus on the client's product. So I think it's a clever planning and utilising every shot you do or every shoot that you're going to do, and seeing if there is any room for, you go to a particular area to do a shoot for a lifestyle shoot. You've got people in that. There's models in that, but you're also in a beautiful area. You can just turn a couple of angles and get some shots of the views or the architecture of the buildings or something like that.
Yeah, you're totally right. I don't think any photographer, unless you're specifically shooting for stock, I think you should be looking at your commission photography, but looking at increasing your ability to earn income. Let's be honest. I mean, no one's going to upload to a stock photo library because they like doing it. They want to earn extra money out of it, and so the only the way of doing that is to increase extra variations on what you're already shooting. It's a let's say you had two accounts. You had a current account where you put your money into every month, and every month you had an extra account where you think, well, I don't need that. That doesn't pay the mortgage. It doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah.
I'm going to save that for whatever else. That's what I always think photographers should look at as stock photography as, unless you shoot specifically for stock, which I don't think many of your photographers do.
Yeah.
But they should be looking at it as an extra income, a bit of a pension plan. Maybe they go, right, okay, you're right. I'm shooting a property today, but can I shoot some generic images? Or could I actually shoot some of the product? But I'm going to check it with the client first of all, and it's going to be in my contract, which I have in the contract I've written, is that you say, right, I may upload this image to a stock photo library, and then they know, and that's where the issues are sort of unblurred, because you say, right, this is what I'm going to do, because as a photographer, they're your images. You keep the copyright. You're not shooting for the client. You are shooting for the client, but they're your images. Unless you've given the copyright over, which I hope you haven't. And if you have, I'm hoping you charge a hell of a lot more than what you should be charging.
Yeah. And then when you were talking about, you say it's not as big a thing with the more niche sites, but what sort of volumes are stock libraries looking for? Are they looking for, is there a minimum amount you can upload? And also for a photographer, really, what should they be looking at creating if they want to make a decent income?
Most photo libraries, if not all, apart from maybe one, will have a certain minimum of images you can upload. So say, for example, if you were to contact Getty or any specialist library and say, look, I've got 500 images, they're probably going to say, no, it's not worth it, because it's a numbers game. It never used to be a numbers game. It used to be, I hate to say this, but photography has become less about quality and more about quantity, because the digital age has changed everything. Images have become less important. I'm not saying that the images have lessened in quality, because they haven't. Actually, the quality of images has increased, and it's an inverse proportion. The quality of imagery has gone up, but the fees have gone down. Is bizarre. And the reason for that is that you see pictures everywhere. Instagram, Etsy, every single social media channel, you see images, and that's devalued the image. The fee. The fees have gone down. Let's be honest about it. But photo libraries need good images. They want images and they want to sell images, but the fees have gone down. You're not going to get the fees that you did 20 years ago. I think commission photography is different. I think actually the fees for commission photography have gone up. You do get more, actually, or commissions than you did 10, 15 years ago, because I think that sort of scale has increased, which is great. Whereas I think if you can see in my hands, commission photography gone up, stock photography has gone down. And the reason for that is because you see pictures everywhere, and the digital age has changed that. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's going to happen.
Well, the digital age it's imagery has become effectively the currency of the internet, isn't it? Because if you want to be seen, you've got to have imagery. It's a very imagery driven thing, so that the demand for it is gone absolutely massive. But some Ovis has just pointed something out. It is a series of images, and it's basically taken from. I imagine from what you're saying is with no faces in the shot, so it's behind the person. So is that something that could be marketed? Because I suppose with them, with you not physically being able to see somebody, but you could see what they're doing, or you could see it's demonstrating somebody maybe opening an oven door and putting a pizza in, but you can't see the person. Then that is a quite a
Yeah,
saleable
yeah.
image.
It's a very sellable image. Actually, I have to say, because in food photography, actually having interaction with people is very important. Once upon a time, it used to be like, that's a dish. Look back at food photography for, in the last 20 years. Every recipe book, every cookery book always had the picture of the dish.
Yeah,
Now
that was it.
you see, you see it's changed completely. I mean, I only know this because I managed a food and drink photo library. The great looking cookery books, and I think things like Hugh Fernley Whittingstall changed this. His book on like meat, his vegetable cook was very much interactive. Had a pictures of putting images into an oven, creating food. Whereas, in the 70s, it was the picture of the dish. So those sort of images that photographer mentioned are brilliant, perfect for stock.
Yeah, so effectively telling a story, isn't it? And it's
Yeah,
making it, even though it's not making it brand based, it's less generic than something on a white background with a pizza.
exactly.
Then it starts to look a bit more humanized.
Yeah,
I would suppose. Yeah.
yeah, and also, but as long as that photographer has if it was a commission shot, just check. Have you got permission to do this? So it's, was that image part of the initial brief? Have the client used that image on their own website, in their own publication, their own print material, or were those extra images that he or she took as part of the shoot? Because if that's the case, that as I bore myself, Jeff. You own the copyright.
Yeah.
If they're your images, you can use them, but you don't want to upset your client. You don't
Yeah.
want your
Yeah.
client to suddenly say, hang on a minute, I commissioned you for 50 shots or 30 shots, but I know they're not ours, but I've seen you using my images. Just check. It's a quick conversation, and it can
And
only
just
be
if anybody has any other questions, you pop them in the comments before we finish, because we're coming on to the last question now. But so with stock agencies and stock websites, and especially these specialist ones that we're talking about, will they actually give you advice? Will they give you a bit of a, when you're going to work with them, will they say like, oh, well, if you have any of this type of stuff, this would do well. This is the type of stuff that our customers are looking for.
Yes, definitely. Specialist stock libraries all have a shooting list. They'd be mad not to. So I remember when I was managing the libraries I did, if someone phoned in and you didn't have a subject, you'd add it to the shooting list. So you'd say, someone would phone and say, oh yeah, we need some pizzas being made in Tuscany. And you think, oh no, we haven't got that. So you'd add it to the shooting list.
Yeah.
So, and even Anime, some of the bigger libraries, they have their own shooting list. If you log on to Anime, they will have a list of images they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And will that change? Is that like a seasonal sort of?
Yeah. It changes all the time. I mean, I remember in a food agency, we were always looking for images with hands preparing food. So close-ups of hands, so generic images. My claim to fame, and it's my only claim to fame, is being a picture of my hand holding a salt and pepper pot, shaking some pepper onto some fish and chips, because they didn't just want fish and chips. I think that's when things are starting to change. Instead of having fish and chips, they wanted fish and chips with a hand shaking salt and pepper on. So we had a studio there, so we could sort of pop out the back, and the photographer Garrett Buntrock could say, Graham, you've got amazing hands. They're beautiful. He was
Funny enough, Sue Todd's just said she was going to have to watch this later, and Sue Todd is, Sue Todd's a fantastic food photographer.
I know Sue.
And I'm sure Sue has, in her stuff that she does stuff for the client, she does stuff in her. She creates a lot of her own sort of stuff that tells stories and stuff. So I think, so you're definitely going to have to watch this, because it will probably give you another way to think about the creation of images, and obviously for the specialist sites. And things like, I suppose, flat layers and overhead shots and, shots that, product layouts, but that don't, as you say, have that branding in, maybe a a notebook with a cup of coffee and a pen and that sort of stuff. Those are
Yeah.
going to be really interesting images that you can create as projects and shoot for a bit of white space as well, so that clients can put their own, or potential clients can put their own branding in.
Do you know some of the best-selling images, Jeff, are cutouts? Let's be honest. So say, you can make an apple look as beautiful as you like, but if you stick one on a white background, our best-selling image at Anthony Blake was an apple with a bite taken out on a white background, because you could use it wherever you like. So not necessarily the most beautiful images. This is really important, actually, for photographers watching this. The best images, the most beautiful images, don't make the best stock images, because they're almost too beautiful and they're too specific.
Yeah.
Generic images are the best.
Brilliant. So it's really just, start thinking. There's probably loads of stuff around that you can, and especially Sue, the stuff that you're doing all the time with your product. Even as you're building up the shot, so you're creating a shot, and then you're going to pop the client's produce in, then maybe do a few shots without the client's bottle of, because Sue creates these beautiful sort of creatively styled, storytelling shots, and then she'll put the client's produce or jar or whatever in there, but everything else is not necessarily the client's. It's what she's used to stylize it. So you could create that and have that as a generic to sell on a stock site where somebody will drop their own, or their graphic designer will drop their own product in. But for the new book that I've just released, I've had a designer doing that very same thing. Look on websites for a picture of a coffee cup, a book that we can put my book front cover on, and a laptop, so they can put my website on the front of the laptop. And found loads of those, so it just looks like it's branded exactly to my brand.
Yeah, no, exactly. Stock photography is different to commission photography. They're two different beasts. They really, really are. And when you're commissioned, you want to get the most beautiful image. You want to get the most perfect image, and it's the same for stock. You want beautiful, whatever, but it's quite a lot. Tell you what, everyone watching this, pick up the newspapers this weekend. Go and buy 5 newspapers, open them, and look at the food or the architectural or the travel photography. And not necessarily the most beautiful or best for pictures, because they don't want that. They don't want the most beautiful pictures. They want a picture showing Canada, Nicaragua, India. If they want a picture of Taj Mahal, they don't necessarily want the most beautiful, atmospheric, misty-looking image. I mean, I've been to the Taj Mahal in the morning when it's misty and beautiful, but if you're showing in a newspaper article, you don't want that necessarily. Maybe they do. They might do, but it's more often than not, they want the most generic picture of the Taj Mahal.
Something that's easily identifiable and recognizable with whatever they... Yeah.
Exactly. It's a whole different, and that's why stock and commissioned are not in competition with each other. They never have been, and they probably never will be, because, and this is if anyone is watching this, and I think it's the most, I've been warbled on for far too long, and I'm sorry, but I feel quite passionate about it. But, stock is not in competition with commissioned photography. It never has been, and it never will be. If you're going to commission a photographer, you will. If you're going to buy stock, you will. You won't suddenly think, "Oh, I was going to commission a photographer, but now I can buy stock." It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It really doesn't. And any photographer who goes on LinkedIn, it's the only thing I get cross with, because you think, well, you're wrong, because that was never going to happen anyway. They were always going to buy stock.
And I think it's our job as photographers to look for that opportunity, plan our shoots a bit more, look at, because all the photographers, other than maybe the headshot photographers I work with, there's a lot of really good sort of niche photographers who can find, go onto those independent sites, find a site or a specialist that deals with their style of photography, and then start planning their shoots so that you're creating a percentage of the images that are not for the client, that could be used. They're quite neutral, they're very generic, and could be used to build up this sort of like little baseline of passive income, because effectively, that's what it's going to be. And that is a way that my own business models changed with my mentoring and stuff that I do. So now my model is changed to that I have a passive income stream coming in from some of the stuff from my ambassadorships, sponsorships, book sales, stuff like that. And if you can develop a decent passive income, it takes the pressure off you finding new jobs, isn't it?
Well, once an image is with the stock library, it's there. You don't have to do anything else. Okay, it might never earn you any money, but it's a numbers game. So the more you put up there, if you earn £200 a month, it's £200 you never got. If you earn £1,000 a month, it's £1,000 you didn't have. You're not working towards this. It's a great term, Jeff.
Yeah.
Hello, you've got a podcast there. It's called Passive Income. I like it. And also, as I've been sat here, I feel really bad that we've left out headshot photography, because let's be honest, headshot photographers, you cannot put those onto a photo library. But
unless there's a photo library for email scammers and people who hack people's accounts, then they would make a fortune, wouldn't they?
And or those people who do cutouts of photography and say, I can offer amazing. But do you know what? Okay, Jeff, I'm gonna say this now, and you can edit it out if you like. You've got, say, 100 photographers who specialize in headshot photography. Say if you set up a community of headshot photographers and they all put their images up to let's not call it a photo library, let's call it a database of headshot photography. Each of those people who had and they moved and they changed companies, whatever else, they could then download their headshot again. That almost becomes a headshot photo library. I know everyone ages, everyone changes, but there is an opportunity there that photographers instead of photographers being in competition with each other, they should come together and say, all right, we're headshot photographers. I've taken this picture of this person in 2021, but they've changed companies and they commission me, not the company. So they want to take their picture with them. They just download their new headshot to their new company.
I think I think headshots is probably one of the only ones that isn't, it's easily resaleable. But I think, but the majority of us, walk around all the time with mobile phones in our pockets, which have, 50 megapixel cameras, brilliant cameras that have the availability to take very high quality raw images as well. So, we've got to be thinking all the time of it doesn't have to be taken on a DSLR. Because there was images, you think about it, there was images sold on Shutterstock or images sold on sites 10 years ago with cameras that were top of the range that have less than what the mobile phone has now.
Exactly. And it's changing all the time. And I'm very aware that this is a conversation that we could be talking about stock photography for hours. And if anyone wants to email me or drop me a message, there's no charge whatsoever. I can, give people advice and help them out.
Well, I've put your website on there, so if people are wanting to know any more about what you actually do in the terms of, your copyright and your contracts. So if anybody needs to know a bit about photography contracts, or if you haven't got a contract in place, Graham is your man to speak to. And I must say, Graham is probably one of the nicest guys in the photographic industry. He really is out there to help people. He's a really, really sound guy. And obviously connect with Graham on LinkedIn as well. He's a member of my private community. He helps quite a lot of the photographers I work with. And it's always a pleasure to get him on. And if anybody does have any particular people they would like to see on a podcast or anything they would like on a LinkedIn Live or anything they would like discussing, any people from any particular companies within the photographic industry, drop me a message or tag in the comments because it means then I can approach those people and see if they'd be prepared to come on. Because the whole point about these lives, it's not just me babbling on about marketing and branding. It's about giving as much possible as I can and with guests to the community, to the photographic community, and help people out and get us all making a lot more money, building our businesses and being a lot more effective and getting ourselves out there. So thanks again, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's nice to see some of the awesome photographers group here as well today. And Graham, you've been an absolute star. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone. No problem. It really isn't.
Thanks again. Thanks, everyone. Take care.